"Put your hands out the window," they screamed. He complied. "Get out of the car," they ordered at the same time. Those are the bone-chilling words two police officers screamed at a black man in a U.S. Army uniform with his hands held high in surrender. Flashing lights sliced through the gas station as two officers pointed their guns at decorated Second Lieutenant Caron Nazario in his brand-new SUV. He was calm, but his voice betrayed his terror. "I'm honestly afraid to get out." For this soldier, a routine stop was escalating into a fight for his life. But the one thing the officers couldn't see was the very thing that would expose their aggression and change everything in an instant. This is a story of how a routine traffic stop spiraled into a nightmare, and how one man's identity exposed the truth in a shocking instant. Before I dive into this interesting story, kindly tell us where you're watching from and also subscribe to this channel. It all started just minutes earlier on a stretch of U.S. Route 460. Officer Daniel Crocker initiated a traffic stop on Lieutenant Nazario's brand new Chevrolet Tahoe. The official reason? The officer claimed he couldn't see a rear license plate, but the temporary plate, issued by the dealer, was clearly visible and taped inside the rear window, a fact later confirmed by the officer's own Bodycam footage. Nazario, seeing the police lights in his rear-view mirror, did exactly what law enforcement experts often advise. Instead of pulling over on the dark, unlit roadside, he slowed down, put on his turn signal, and drove less than a mile to a well-lit public gas station. It was a move meant to ensure safety and transparency for everyone involved. He was trying to de-escalate a situation before it could even begin. But as he pulled into the gas station, any hope for a calm, professional interaction vanished. Before Nazario could even put his SUV in park, Officer Crocker was out of his car with his weapon drawn, treating the situation not as a minor traffic issue, but as a high-risk felony stop. A second officer, Joe Gutierrez, arrived moments later and immediately escalated things even further. The nightmare was just beginning. With two guns pointed at him, Lieutenant Nazario was trapped. He placed his cell phone on the dashboard to record the encounter and raised his empty hands out of the window. What followed was a storm of contradictory commands. "Put your hands out the window," they screamed. He complied. "Get out of the car," they ordered at the same time. How could he possibly do both? To unbuckle his seatbelt and open the door, he'd have to lower his hands, an action that could easily be misinterpreted as reaching for a weapon. He was in an impossible, life-threatening situation. "I'm honestly afraid to get out," Nazario repeated, trying to explain his fear. "Get out of the car now." Gutierrez shouted again. Nazario, still in his full uniform, tried to appeal to their shared sense of duty. "I'm actively serving this country, and this is how you're going to treat me?" he asked in disbelief. Gutierrez was unmoved. The rank, the uniform, the service, none of it seemed to matter. The lieutenant repeatedly asked what was going on, but the officers just grew more aggressive. Gutierrez then threatened Nazario, telling him he was fixing to ride the lightning, a phrase Nazario's lawyers would later argue was a clear death threat. Seeing Nazario's hand still in the air, Officer Gutierrez unleashed a stream of pepper spray directly into the soldier's face. The chemical agent filled the SUV, choking Nazario and his small dog, which was cowering in a crate in the back. Blinded and gagging, Nazario struggled to breathe. "That's messed up," he choked out. Even then, the officers continued to shout for him to get out of the vehicle. Finally, stumbling out of his SUV with his hands still raised, he was forced to the ground with knee strikes to his legs and handcuffed. On the ground, surrounded by the officers who had just assaulted him, Lieutenant Nazario asked a question that hung heavy in the air. "Why am I being treated like this?" For several agonizing minutes, as medics arrived to flush the pepper spray from his eyes, Nazario was treated like a common criminal. The officers searched his vehicle and found nothing illegal. There were no warrants for his arrest. He had a valid concealed carry permit, and his firearm was unloaded and stored properly. They had absolutely nothing on him. This is the moment when everything should have changed, but the hostility continued. Instead of de-escalating, Officer Gutierrez began discussing what charges they could bring against Nazario: obstruction of justice, eluding police. He then appeared to offer a deal. If Nazario would chill and let this go, they wouldn't file charges that could threaten his military career. It was a blatant threat, Stay silent about our misconduct, or we'll try to ruin your life. The officers thought they held all the cards. They had assaulted him, threatened him, and were now trying to coerce him into silence. But the story wasn't over. Throughout the entire ordeal, Nazario had been trying to tell them who he was, a second lieutenant in the United States Army. While they had dismissed his words, the physical proof of his uniform and his ID was undeniable. The reveal wasn't one single, dramatic moment. It was a slow, dawning realization for the officers that came only after their aggression had peaked and their legal position had crumbled. The Bodycam footage captures this shift. The shouting tapers off. The aggressive, commanding presence of Officer Gutierrez deflates, replaced by a more defensive tone. He even acknowledged he understood why Nazario drove to a well-lit area, a complete reversal from the claim that Nazario was eluding police. The transformation was obvious. The man they had treated as a dangerous suspect was now, in their eyes, a fellow man in uniform, one whose story could have serious consequences for their careers. The bias that fueled their initial aggression was suddenly confronted by the reality of Nazario's status. They hadn't pulled over just anyone. They had assaulted a commissioned officer of the U.S. military. The power had quietly shifted. Lieutenant Nazario, despite being pepper-sprayed and handcuffed, now held the moral high ground. The officer's conduct was laid bare, exposed by the camera footage and their own sudden change in behavior. His ID and the uniform it represented had become a mirror, forcing them to see the injustice of their own actions. In the end, Lieutenant Nazario was released without any charges. He later filed a federal lawsuit for the violation of his constitutional rights. The video of the encounter went viral, sparking national outrage. The consequences for the officers were swift. Officer Joe Gutierrez, who pepper-sprayed and threatened Nazario, was fired. An investigation by Virginia's Attorney General later found that the Windsor Police Department engaged in a pattern of discriminatory policing. The investigation revealed that while black residents make up only 22% of the town's population, they accounted for 42% of its traffic stops during the period reviewed. The legal battle, however, has been long and complicated. In January 2023, a jury awarded Nazario only $3,685, finding Gutierrez liable for assault and Officer Crocker liable for an illegal search. Nazario's lawyers called the verdict a miscarriage of justice and appealed. In May 2024, a federal appeals court delivered a mixed ruling. It granted the officers immunity from claims of excessive force. However, the court reversed a key part of the lower court's decision, finding that Officer Gutierrez was not entitled to qualified immunity for Nazario's claim of unreasonable seizure. The judge wrote that Gutierrez's conduct, combined with his death threats against Lieutenant Nazario, was a clear violation of the Fourth Amendment. This decision opened the door for Nazario to sue Officer Gutierrez a second time, a legal fight that was initiated in August 2024. The story of Caron Nazario is a powerful and disturbing example of how quickly a situation can escalate when prejudice clouds judgment. It highlights the stark difference between the respect a uniform should command and the reality many black and brown Americans face with law enforcement. The moment the officers realized they were dealing with a military officer, their entire demeanor changed, revealing their initial aggression wasn't based on a legitimate threat, but on a biased assumption. This case forces us to ask tough questions about accountability, justice, and the true meaning of service. What do you think should have happened to these officers? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below.